Awesome. So I think we can go ahead and get started. Thank you everybody for joining me today for this webinar and also for the Run for Salmon runs. I'm excited to talk about this fun week of action and movement to support salmon and southern resident orcas. But before I do that, I just want to tell you a little bit about who I am and who Environment Oregon and Environment Washington Research and Policy Center are. So my name is Ian. I'm the Oceans Advocate with the two organizations, and both groups really are statewide grassroots environmental advocacy organizations that fight for a cleaner, greener Oregon and Washington state. Essentially, they just believe in more places where nature can thrive. And as the Oceans Advocate, I really believe that healthy marine ecosystems and ocean wildlife are a part of that. And in the Pacific Northwest, that picture could not really be realized without healthy orca and salmon populations. And so that is kind of the basis of why we wanted to do this week of action and movement, the Run for Salmon runs. And I'm excited to talk a little bit more about that. So I guess kind of to get started, I want to talk a little bit more specifically about southern resident orcas and kind of who they are and where they live. Um, so as you can see here, there's the graphic of the Northwest United States and British Columbia. And basically from January to April every year, southern resident orcas kind of hang out in this region, mostly actually around the mouth of Columbia River. But then during the summer and fall months, they can travel down to places like California and even up north into sort of like central British Columbia and even southern Alaska. But for the most of the time, again, they spend a lot of their time in and around the mouth of the Columbia River and then also frequent Puget Sound. So you can see, again, just from that region or on that graphic, kind of the region where they go. And then you can also see a pod of southern resident orcas. And this photo is actually taken from in Puget Sound. You can just see how close to the shore they can get just with the background with the land right behind them. Um, the next thing I wanted to talk about was actually, sorry, back one, the coastal waters around salmon runs. So as you can kind of just see from this graphic, it kind of gives you a picture of how complicated the salmon spawning streams are in terms of kind of where they go and where they navigate kind of upriver. You can see a lot of areas in Oregon and Washington are really essential towards maintaining healthy salmon runs. And as we're going to talk about a little bit later, there are a series of problematic dams in the lower Snake River that kind of impede salmon's travel overall. Um, so I want to spend just a little bit more time on southern resident orcas and sort of their biology and background. Um, Southern resident orcas are an endangered species of dolphins, actually. Right now, to date, there's only around 75 of them left. I think the most recent survey from September put it exactly at 75. And I want to talk specifically about one southern resident orca, J19, who is a grandmother of the J pod. There's three pods split between J, K, and L. And J19 is really important as a grandmother in the group. So in this photo, you can actually see her fin standing tall over the water, and this is a really characteristic sort of image of southern resident orcas. Females actually have fins that measure up to 4 feet long and bend a little bit backwards, and the fins of males can actually be over 6 feet tall. One of her calves in this photo is actually J51, who's swimming behind her. You can actually see they're kind of like peach colored or orange. That's actually because they haven't built up enough fat yet to like make their pigment white. That so the peach color is actually from their blood vessels that are a little bit closer to the surface of their skin because they're not as hefty, so to speak. But um, overall, most just going back to the females, most female whales can measure around 28 feet long and weigh up to 16,500 pounds, which is about the size of three mid-size SUVs combined. They're a little bit smaller than the males overall, and the males can actually weigh 22,000 pounds and be around 32 feet long. Um, The other cool thing is because they're in these sort of subgroups between JK and L pod, they actually spend their whole lives with their families. And so J19 and J51 will spend their whole time together, which is really cool. Um, Another sort of um, thing that I actually wanted to talk about was yeah, I already talked about everything there. Talked about the males. Um, Sorry, my computer is like freaking out. um, this graph or graphic here kind of splits up or it kind of outlines a little bit more the actual breakdown between the three pods. Um, which I mentioned are JK and L, and they often swim in these groups together, and they don't really communicate with any of the other two pods. Sons and daughters of orcas swim, hunt, and socialize within the pods, and basically take instructions from their mothers and grandparents throughout their entire lives, which is really cool. Okay, I just talked about that. There we go. Um, So, even more interesting about orcas overall is their lifespan patterns. Scientists have actually noticed that females seem to live a little bit longer than the males do. And in fact, orcas are only one of the only species other than humans that live longer or long after their window for reproductivity. And a female southern resident orca actually gives birth between their 30s and 40s. And then they actually live to around 80 or beyond if everything goes well. Um, so again, kind of like the question is like, why do they have this sort of lifespan? And science have actually like tried to figure this out by analyzing data of southern resident orcas in the Northwest for decades. And they discovered some interesting patterns, namely, again, that young orcas with grandmothers are more likely to survive, which kind of indicates this matriarchal sort of society within the subgroups, which is really cool. Um, J19 is only 40 or so years old, and she's just in midlife. And that's just great news for her children and grandchildren. The photo in the top left of that is them kind of all hanging out in JPod, which is really awesome. And scientists really believe that in part the success of baby calves with grandmothers is because the grandmothers actually have a lot of wisdom that they pass on to their young. So they're basically teaching them through experiences, basically like where the best places are to find salmon, how to hunt for salmon properly, and they just really guide the young orcas to these places. They've also been documented sharing fish and actually teaching them how to do so, which I think is really awesome. So again, the grandmothers are kind of the matriarch of of these pods, or at least the female orcas are. And they're really doing their best to keep their family safe, fed, and healthy. And it just really goes to show how intelligent and charismatic these animals are, and kind of makes us realize that we should be doing more to make sure that they're thriving. Um, this graph here actually shows the breakdown of southern resident orcas like population kind of over time. And as you can see, um, they're not doing great. Their population kind of was around 100 in the mid 1900s, and then you can see kind of a sharp decline in the 70s. And that was actually due to the result of this thing called the capture era, where southern resident orcas were actually um, hunted not for food, but to be captured and put in aquariums around the world, which is really unfortunate. You can see their population start to slowly increase over time, but not in really any meaningful way. It's kind of just been stuck in this upward trend for a little bit, and then it's been on the decline for some time now. There's been a lot of reasons for their decline, but the primary one is just really a lack of food. They eat almost exclusively a diet of Chinook salmon, and actually, as this next slide kind of indicates, Chinook salmon are decreasing in number and in size pretty drastically. You can see from the photos just how big these fish used to be. Um, and you could imagine if you're an orca having to sustain themselves by eating this food over and over again, the bigger the fish are, the less hard you are going to have to go out to find food because you're just going to need to eat less fish overall. So nowadays the fish are much smaller and there are actually far fewer of them in the water, so they just really need to try much, much harder. Um, so the photo on the furthest most right actually just shows Chinook salmon runs across the region sort of broadly. And as you can see, the majority of them, or at least a significant number of them, are actually extinct or at risk of going extinct, functionally extinct, we mean. Um, and that's a huge, huge problem. Southern resident orcas, their main food source is Chinook salmon specifically. If everything's going well, it comprises around 80% of their diet. So the fact that this is kind of the state of things, it's kind of a no-brainer as to why they're struggling, which makes the solution all that simple. Really, what we need to do is we need to prioritize saving salmon. Um, so as you can see from this graph, this is just the region, the tri-state region, more or less between Idaho, Washington, and Oregon. And you can see a sort of breakdown of um, where dams are on the river and whether or not salmon can kind of get by and pass through them. As you can see, sort of right in the center of the graphic, you can see 4 dams on the lower Snake River. Um, these dams are the distance kind of between them is roughly around 140 miles, and fish have a really hard time actually making it upstream of them, and they're blocking spawning grounds in Idaho, and that's a huge problem. Scientists and researchers have long pointed to this region as one of the areas to prioritize restoring a free, healthy, and flowing river to help salmon runs broadly in the region and consequently help southern resident orcas. Um, so to restore access to those headwaters in Idaho, the solution again for what we're kind of asking for is kind of simple. We need to breach dams on the lower Snake River. Um, that is really going to be the most effective thing that we can do to restore access to these spawning grounds and help recover Chinook salmon populations across the region, and then again, consequently help southern resident orcas. Um, the dam removal and the logistics around it is a bit of a complicated process right now politically, and we need to continue to do all that we can to show our elected leaders in Washington and Oregon that people do want to see salmon recovered and thereby helping southern resident orcas. Um, and there are a lot of ways to do that without directly getting in the weeds with like formally moving forward in the process with dam removal. And that kind of begs the question of what can we do now? And really, that's kind of why we wanted to start this run for salmon runs. This photo here is actually from an event that our summer canvas office last year actually attended. You can see everybody there in our Environment Washington sort of attire. They canvassed on this issue last year in the summer of 2024, and then also in the summer of 2021 or 2022. And we collectively have had tens of thousands of conversations already with Washingtonians about sort of the plight of salmon, the plight of southern resident orcas, and really that we need to breach these dams if we're going to actually save them. Um, so we've been working on this issue for a long time, and we're excited to move forward with this run for salmon runs, which we think is sort of a great way to continue to build visibility for this issue, um, while also kind of sidestepping the complicated federal landscape of things in today's day and age. Um, and again, that's kind of why we wanted to do this. So specifically, um, The goal of this event is to traverse 14 miles over the course of the week, to represent 1/10 the amount of river that is blocked by the Snake River dams, and to basically take photos with some of the materials that I have sent you, and then also attend our sessions that we're organizing throughout the week. On Monday, um, we're going to be doing a writing workshop on how to write persuasive sort of campaign content to ideally place in local papers or just to build support or visibility for the issue overall. Um, on Tuesday, we're going to be doing a virtual action hour. We're going to be calling our target offices and then also signing petitions directed at them. Thursday, we're going to be doing a social media day of action. And then Friday, we're going to do a capstone webinar where I'm going to talk a little bit more about um, how the week went, any notable experiences, and that's also when I'll be doing a raffle giveaway of Patagonia merchandise that people sign up for when they sign up for this event. Um, and sort of the last thing that I actually just wanted to cover was to invite anyone who's based in Portland to join me in traversing some miles. So I really like to run and we'll be organizing, as you can see from the photo or from the slide here, um, 7 different community runs throughout Portland over the course of the next 7 days. And I will be traversing 20 miles each day to eventually cover the full distance blocked by the Snake River dams over the course of the week, so 140 miles. Obviously, people who are attending do not have to do the distance with me, but like even doing a mile or two with me would be really awesome. So I'll be doing this, and then I will be hosting the events at night and getting people um, working to build visibility for this cause overall, which I'm really excited about. Um, that was pretty much the overview that I wanted to give today. I went through everything pretty quickly, so I just wanted to leave room for any questions that people have. You can use the chat feature or the Q&A feature, and I'll just give it a couple minutes for folks to see if they have any questions.